So back in April, I got my hands on a new roguelite called Deadzone Rogue. The demo delivered an exhilarating cooperative FPS experience with intricate mechanics and an almost overwhelming variety of builds and strategies. There's something about the mechanics of permadeath, trial and error, and procedural variation that is so enticing in roguelites, and I saw a ton of potential with Deadzone Rogue, like it could carve out its own identity in an already crowded genre. And luckily, I didn't have to wait too long. Just 5 months later, the full release was here. The question is, did Deadzone Rogue actually live up to that potential, or did it miss the chance to be something truly great? The story kicks off with our nameless protagonist waking up aboard a colony ship orbiting Earth. He doesn't know who he is or why he's there, so he heads deeper into the ship to piece together his identity and inevitably overcome the challenge that is now in front of him. Now normally, I wouldn't spend too much time on the story in a roguelite. For most games in this genre, it's not really the main selling point. But then Hades came along in 2020 and completely changed the game, showing how rich, evolving storytelling could be woven into a roguelite format. Since then, there's been a higher expectation for how narrative can be handled in this genre. Unfortunately, Deadzone Rogue doesn't really rise to that challenge. The main campaign is too short to tell any kind of in-depth story, and what's here mostly leans on very familiar sci-fi tropes. Add in some cheesy dialogue, voice acting that never quite hits the mark, and a protagonist whose personal stakes never really feel all that compelling, and the whole thing ends up falling flat. Even during the bigger plot twists, I found myself shrugging with indifference.
Oh God, is that me? Where the hell is my face?
It's not terrible, but it's also not memorable. And when compared to the heights other roguelites have reached, it's clear the story isn't where Deadzone Rogue shines. But honestly, like I said earlier, the story isn't the main reason most people play roguelites. It's the gameplay. That's where these games really prove themselves, and Deadzone Rogue is no exception. It takes the classic roguelite formula and layers it into a fast, dynamic FPS that's a blast from start to finish. Deadzone Rogue has you fighting through rooms filled with swarming spiders, hulking brutes, and grotesque abominations I don't even know how to describe. And every encounter is about dodging attacks, exploiting weak points, and kiting enemies while steadily building up your arsenal. On the surface, the shooting feels familiar, but what sets Deadzone Rogue apart is how it handles progression and build crafting. Like most roguelites, every cleared room gives you an upgrade, but here they're divided into perks, augments, items, and gear. The perk system is the real star here. There's a massive pool to choose from, and they can drastically change how you play. One run might have you stacking crit chance with a standard ranged build, while another pushes you into stealth assassinations or spreading elemental debuffs across the entire room. The way perks are handed out is pretty smart too. Each run starts with an augment, which is your most powerful perk and sets the baseline for your build. From there, you'll choose 3 primary perks, and most of the upgrades you see later tie back into those choices. It's still got randomness, so sometimes you'll have to pivot or improvise, but the system reduces the bad luck factor that can often derail runs in other roguelites. Weapons and armor add another layer as well. Each piece can be upgraded and infused with one of 6 elements, all with unique effects. Lightning, for example, boosts crit damage on shocked enemies for massive damage, while Cryo trades raw power for freezing enemies in their tracks. Then there are the items that you pick up along the way, which provide little passive bonuses that can sometimes completely reshape your build. One of my favorites lets my primary weapon apply both its own elemental effect and the effect of my secondary weapon. In one of my best runs, I paired Chain Lightning with Void Tendrils, and the results were ridiculous. I'd hit one target, tendrils would spread out to nearby enemies, and each of these hits would trigger Chain Lightning, bouncing across the room in a cascade of damage. It felt unstoppable, and the crazy part is I only stumbled into that build after being forced off my comfort picks and trying new gear. On top of that, there are rarer superior items and synergies between perks and equipment that push the possibilities even further. The sheer volume of combinations is insane, and even after beating the main campaign and dipping into the side content, I still feel like I've only scratched the surface. All of this even gets better in co-op. You can bring up to 2 friends, which adds both chaos and strategy. Some enemies are brutal enough that coordination is essential, whether that means dedicating someone to crowd control or letting an assassin-type build focus on high-priority targets. This stealth mechanic adds another layer of depth here too. When your team enters a new room, they'll be invisible until they fire the first shot. This gives you just enough breathing room to plan before everything kicks off. The whole system is dynamic, flexible, and above all, it's fun. Deadzone Rogue nails the roguelite loop of experimenting, adapting, and finding builds that feel completely broken in the best way. As much fun as Deadzone Rogue is, that initial high we felt early on didn't last as long as it should have, and that comes down to pacing and replayability. The main campaign only has 3 levels, each ending with a solid boss fight. Those levels are engaging, but once they're done, there isn't much else pulling you forward. Each level takes about an hour, and because it's a roguelite, you're expected to fail a few times before clearing everything, so most players will probably finish the campaign in 8 to 10 hours. That's not terrible, but it feels light compared to the amount of side content packed in around it. Finishing a level unlocks optional missions that give you more perks, guns, and even skins. On paper, that sounds like great replay value, but in practice, these missions feel like filler. They're usually just repeat encounters with minor twists, like forcing you to only use sniper rifles. They aren't bad, but they rarely feel rewarding, and the cosmetics in particular didn't give me much motivation to keep going. There's also the option to replay campaign missions on higher difficulties, which could have been a great way to test team coordination and push builds further. But even that falls flat because of how overpowered the permanent upgrade system is. Throughout your runs, you'll collect multiple currencies to spend on permanent upgrades, and the bonuses are massive. We're not talking about a 5% boost here and there. Some upgrades raise a stat by as much as 500%. It doesn't take long before your character is so juiced up that the earlier missions, even on harder difficulties, turn into a joke. We tested it by replaying the first mission on one of the tougher modes, and we melted the final boss so quickly he was barely able to fight back. I appreciate that the game tries to offer more to do, but the balance feels off. The sheer amount of side content ends up overshadowing the main campaign, which feels too short by comparison. Personally, I would have preferred fewer side missions if it meant even 1 or 2 more full campaign levels. The good news is the ending does leave the door open for future updates and more missions. So while the base game's replay value fizzles out too quickly, there's at least potential for more meaningful content down the line. At the end of the day, Deadzone Rogue delivers a unique and exciting spin on the roguelite formula. Its build crafting system is deep, its combat is fast and demanding, and in co-op it can be an absolute blast. When the pieces come together, it creates those unforgettable runs where you feel unstoppable, the kind of moments that make the genre so engaging. But for all its heights, the game struggles to keep that momentum going. The short campaign, the uneven side content, and a permanent upgrade system that undercuts difficulty all combine to sap its replay value far too quickly. It's fun, but it burns out faster than it should. Still, I had a great time running through it with my brothers, experimenting with builds and figuring out crazy strategies. And while the current package leaves me wanting more, the foundation is solid. If the developers expand on it with new missions and balance tweaks, Deadzone Rogue could evolve into something that keeps me coming back for more. Thank you everybody for watching. If you liked what you saw, be sure to like and subscribe and follow us on Twitch for live content. Until next time, cheers!